New York's latest skyscraper is turning heads, but not for the reason you'd expect. This is the Jail Scraper, and when completed, it'll rise higher than the Statue of Liberty and be the tallest correctional facility in the world. It's being built here, on the site of a notorious prison known anonymously as the Tombs. In a city full of controversial developments, this might just be public enemy number one.
Desperate calls from the community to stop construction of a brand new jail.
This is a real assault on our community.
A rally today in Chinatown to stop the construction of a jail there.
No more jail!
Building something like this comes at huge cost, and we're not talking about the $2 billion price tag. Local residents are worried that this massive jail will destroy the social and physical fabric of historic Chinatown, a neighbourhood that they say is already hanging by a thread.
We will not be the sacrificial community for this experiment.
But the city insists this is a vital part of a radical plan to transform New York's brutal justice system.
These jails should have been closed years ago. We are doing it today.
So what exactly is a jail scraper, and could it solve one of New York's biggest problems, or destroy a community forever? Okay, so before we get into this, there's an important distinction to make between prisons and jails. A prison is where you're sent after you've been sentenced for a crime. The infamous Alcatraz or San Quentin are both prisons. A jail is where you're sent if you can't afford or haven't been granted bail, and you'll wait there until your trial. And they can be equally grim, like the enormous Vernon C. Bain Correctional Centre or the Metropolitan Correctional Centre, where the infamous sex offender Jeffrey Epstein died by suicide in 2019. It's an important distinction, and one we're going to come back to later. Now, this is Chinatown, sandwiched in between Little Italy and the Lower East Side of Manhattan.
Chinatown, for those of you who don't know, has been around for well over 100 years. My name is Jan Lee, Jan Lee, Lee. I represent Neighbors United below Canal. Chinatown remains an area that has something like 90% mom and pop businesses, and that's really a rarity nowadays in New York. So it makes for an enjoyable retail experience, but also a great place to live.
This historic neighbourhood is home to the biggest Chinese community in the West. It's a proud, close-knit community, and until recently, it was also the home of this, the Manhattan Detention Complex, aka the Tombs. Now, the original jailhouse dates back to the 19th century and was so hellish that Charles Dickens described it in his American Notes as "Such indecent and disgusting dungeons as these cells would bring disgrace upon the most despotic empire in the world." The most recent incarnation of the Tombs was this 1940s Art Deco tower that was connected by a bridge to a newer tower completed in 1990. In 2023, demolition began on the towers to make way for a new complex, one that would replace the aging facilities and be part of a new chain of jails across the city. Its final design hasn't yet been confirmed, but the Jail Scraper, as it's been nicknamed, will house 886 inmates across 40 stories. Planning permission for the tower allows it to rise as high as 90 metres, with extra height allowed for mechanical floors, which could push the height to 106 metres. That's just shy of the minimum requirement for a skyscraper, but still the tallest jail or prison in the world. The building will swallow up all of the site left by the two towers of the Tombs, including White Street, which is going to be enclosed by the complex and turned into a pedestrian arcade. Meanwhile, 20,000 square feet of space on the ground floor is being given over to commercial and community projects. Now, it's not going to surprise you to learn that building a high-rise jail in the middle of a city comes with some challenges. Building right up to the edge of a city block makes it impossible to deploy basic security features, things like a separate perimeter wall, guard towers, or a yard. But the issues with constructing a city jail don't stop there. One of the most influential designs for correctional facilities is the panopticon. Invented by the English philosopher Jeremy Bentham, it's a circular prison with a central tower which obscures the movements of the guards within. A major benefit of the panopticon is that it allows a small number of guards to monitor a large number of inmates. Many facilities recreate this by building cell blocks which fan out from a central guard post. This creates long sight lines along a row of cells which are impossible to recreate in a high-rise building. But perhaps the biggest problem with high-rise jails is they create a reliance on elevators to get around. These create bottlenecks, which pose a danger to inmates and prison staff.
No visitors allowed. That is the reality right now for some inmates at the Hamilton County Justice Center.
The sheriff says the elevators have trapped deputies with inmates in the past.
But it's not just New York's jails that are struggling with overcrowding. Its roads are too. I've been catching up with the latest in the legal battle over the city's congestion pricing plan thanks to this week's video sponsor, Straight Arrow News. Knowing who's on what side in New York politics is pretty tough, which is why it's really important to have access to clear, balanced reporting that you can trust. Now, you might feel like you've heard all this promise before, but check out Straight Arrow News' rating on All Sides Media, which independently rates the biases of news outlets. They use data from across the media landscape to show who else is reporting on subjects and which side their politics lean to, so you can get a clearer understanding of how a subject's being covered. There's also insightful opinion and commentary, but Straight Arrow News is up front with you so you know where the author's coming from before you dive in. In our increasingly polarised world, if you want less heat and more light, head to Straight Arrow News using the link in the description. It's a great way of supporting impartial journalism, and best of all, it's free, so you haven't got to worry about another monthly subscription. Now, and in a phrase I never thought I'd say, let's head back to jail. So, how do you build a high-rise jail that avoids all these problems? Well, this is Chicago's Metropolitan Correctional Center. Opened in 1975, architect Harry Wees used a number of innovative techniques to solve the problem of its location in the middle of a city. The tower is 88 metres high, with offices and support units occupying the first 9 floors, and cells located on levels 13 to 26. Inmates are grouped in units of 44 cells split across 2 floors, with a double common room in the middle. Now, this close grouping allows different categories of inmates to share the building while limiting the effects of overcrowding. The need for outdoor recreational space was addressed by using the roof as an exercise yard. The building's distinctive triangular design serves 2 functions. By arranging cells around the perimeter, it allows a single prison guard to monitor a large number of cells, replicating the panopticon effect found in larger facilities. The triangular shape also reduces the overall bulk of the building, allowing it to become set back from the road on one side and creating a jail which is less imposing on the community it sits in. But that sense of integration with the community is going to be a challenge to achieve in Chinatown. Here, local residents have been waging a years-long campaign in opposition to this development.
When you're looking at a building as tall and as massive, certainly as heavy as they're trying to build, there's inevitably going to be tremendous impacts on a normal site. But in our site, it's even compounded even more because many of the buildings around that area are very fragile. Most of them are brick and wood tenements that are 5 to 7 stories on one side.
The site is complicated further because it used to be a pond, creating a natural place for water to drain to. Building a jail here would be an incredibly difficult and technical job which could last years and endanger the fragile local economy.
Who's going to be left around this jail site at the end of a 7, 8, 9, 10-year project is really left to question whether or not there actually is going to be a Chinatown surrounding the jail. So what we fear is a demographic change, for one. We fear that the small businesses that are so precious to our community will be lost.
So why is this project going ahead? Well, its story doesn't start here, but over at New York's most infamous jail.
Rikers Island.
Rikers Island.
Rikers Island, New York's massive jail complex just a few miles from Midtown Manhattan.
Sitting on the East River just next to LaGuardia Airport, Rikers houses about 6,000 inmates across 11 jails in an area that's about half the size of Central Park.
What are some words you'd use to describe Rikers Island?
Hell. Plain and simple.
It has a decades-long history of violence, abuse and lawlessness, with crumbling facilities and chronic staff shortages, making it not only the biggest, but also one of the most dangerous jails in the US.
Inmates walked in and out of a cell where a fight lasted about 90 seconds, and an officer had unlocked the cell and then walked away.
In 2023, following a year in which 18 people died on the island, the Department of Corrections stated it would no longer announce the deaths of inmates.
Police released new video tonight of 2 Rikers Island correction officers being attacked.
I support him to do the job I hired him to do, and whatever methods he needs to do.
Conditions are so bad that a judicial review is underway that could take the jail into federal receivership. But despite that, the end is in sight for Rikers.
More breaking news on this very busy Thursday evening. The New York City Council has just approved the controversial plan to close Rikers.
In 2017, after years of campaigning from activists and lawsuits across the city, Mayor Bill de Blasio announced a multi-year plan to permanently close Rikers Island.
The era of mass incarceration is over.
But you can't close the city's largest jail without making room for the inmates to go somewhere. Which brings us back to the difference between a jail and a prison. Prisons don't need to be near very much. In fact, many use remote locations as a security feature. But because the majority of inmates in jails need access to courthouses and other bits of the justice system, that means they need to be well located, and that normally means being in a city. Which is yet another problem with Rikers. As anybody who's ever had to visit nearby LaGuardia Airport knows, travel to this part of the city is pretty terrible. The Department of Corrections spends around $30 million transporting inmates, staff and visitors to and from Rikers. And New York's notorious traffic has been the cause of multiple missed court days. By closing Rikers, Mayor de Blasio saw an opportunity to solve this problem and create a more humane justice system. The plan, announced in 2017, was called the Borough-based Jail System. The first step of the plan was to reduce the overall jail population to 5,000 by 2027, the year by which it mandated Rikers to close. Prisoners would then be held at a series of smaller, higher-quality community facilities across the city. In an effort to avoid recreating the misery of Rikers, these new jails would be smaller, safer, fairer, and have a heavy emphasis on the dignity of the people they house. Strict guidelines were established, calling for the jails to be beacons of high-quality civic architecture, which are befitting their prominent locations in New York's boroughs. An accompanying report, commissioned by New York City Council Speaker Melissa Mark Viverito, recommended moving away from the concept of jails entirely, dubbing the new facilities justice hubs. For inmates passing through, these places would have more natural light, outdoor areas, and rehabilitation centres. But the community would benefit too, with these buildings including public amenities like libraries, green spaces, and art studios. The strategy is to move away from mass incarceration and create better links between the justice system and the community it's there to serve. But for the people of Chinatown, that's too good to be true.
Time has proven that every time a new and improved jail and a new and improved administration has claimed that incarceration of this form is going to be the best one ever, it has failed. It has become overcrowded. It has become degraded physically and also mentally and psychologically.
A key issue of the process which the NUBC takes issue with is the use of a design and build contract to construct the jail. In a traditional arrangement, a project owner, such as the Department of Corrections, hires an architect and a building contractor separately. In this process, the project owner takes on a greater share of responsibility to mediate between the parties. But with design and builds, a project owner hires a contractor who promises to take ownership of all aspects of a project and completes the design stage in-house. Now, design and build is seen as a much more efficient process, but also one in which cost effectiveness can take precedence over high-quality design.
This is a community that's lived with jails for over 100 years, so the community really has done its part. So this is not a matter of not in my backyard. This is a matter of working with the city to improve what they had strived to do, which is to create a judicial system, an incarceration system that actually works.
A lack of trust has already set in over the demolition of the previous towers. The city's guidance said demolition must be conducted to the highest possible standards, but NUBC accused the city of not living up to its promises.
An exterior concrete wall with cinder blocks popping out of place. The building owner says the result of demolition happening at the mega jail site in Chinatown.
NUBC also accused the city of producing excessive amounts of dust during the demolition that's having a detrimental impact on the health of the predominantly elderly local population.
This is a community that lived through 9/11. We are a few blocks away from World Trade Center, and so we know all too well when experts come to you and say, don't worry, it's just dust, it's okay to breathe it in. We found out in 9/11 that wasn't true at all, and many of us ended up with cancer.
The project has a long way to go if it's to live up to its lofty aims. When we reached out to the New York Department of Design and Construction, they told us that a contractor hadn't been appointed yet and declined to comment any further. The August 2027 deadline to close Rikers is not looking good, despite being enshrined in law. And New York Mayor Eric Adams, the man ultimately responsible for carrying out this plan, could soon be a resident himself after being indicted on suspicion of fraud and other offences. Currently, none of the replacement jails are on track to be delivered by this date, and spiralling costs have caused the budget for the overall project to almost double. We asked the DODC if these costs would have an impact on the proposed Manhattan jail. In reply, they simply told us that the project was funded. While a jail scraper might seem like a novelty, it's the inevitable result of the context that's forced everything on this island to reach for the skies for over a century. Even if the city achieves its lofty ambition of creating a more humane, architecturally significant jail, it's clear it has a long way to go to bring the community on site. When people think about New York's famous skyline, they may soon also reflect on its most controversial new addition. This video was sponsored by Straight Arrow News. You can learn more about that at the link below. Don't forget that we're inspiring the next generation of builders through our investment into Borough, a fantastic LEGO subscription service. You can learn more and get started today over at brickborough.com. And as always guys, if you enjoyed this video and you want to get more from the definitive video channel for construction, make sure you're subscribed to the B1M.